Ya mandé como atendía a Adriana.
Ok, gracias.
Thank you, everyone that is already connected. We're gonna give a little bit more minutes in order to wait for someone that will be joining us also. So probably we're gonna start the webinar in around 2 minutes at 10:05, and then we can move forward. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on our webinar. Our team, the corporate and M&A team of Vega Guerrero y Asociados, will be explaining in general terms how to incorporate a Mexican company. We're going to focus on companies that have foreign investment. Our purpose will be to give you highlights and describe the requirements and timeframe for creating a company in Mexico with foreign investment. So everything that we're going to explain today on this webinar obviously applies for Mexican entities with national investment. However, we're going to talk about several differences or several things that foreign investors may want to keep in mind or bear in mind while doing or deciding if investing in Mexico or creating a company, it's a good choice for them. So my name is Joaquin Vega. I am the partner in charge of the corporate and M&A team in Vega Guerrero y Asociados. As you may know already, Vega Guerrero y Asociados is a multidisciplinary law firm that has presence pretty much all around Mexico and focuses our main practice is advice foreign companies doing business in Mexico. We have a very broad scope or uh, frame of types of clients doing business in Mexico with foreign investment. We have helped several companies doing what we call soft landing, which obviously starts in the decision on incorporating a company in Mexico. But we also assist a lot of companies while they're doing their day-to-day business. So we have clients that are already nationals in terms that they have hundreds of employees and most of their directors are already Mexican, so they're very familiar with the regulations and necessities of Mexican legislation. But we also have a strong practice in doing a little bit of corporate comparative law. Several of our lawyers have education in common law jurisdiction, so we're able a little bit to do a type of comparison between the Mexican legislation, what it is close or similar to the common law jurisdiction and what is different. So we try to help you navigate the intricacies of Mexican legislation. Okay. My team, in particular Mariví, will be helping me with the slides. So Mariví, thank you. Can you pass to the next one, please. So this is once someone told me that the main a good practice in order to provide an explanation will be to first explain what you're going to explain what you want to explain, and lastly explain what you have just explained. So I'm going to start doing explaining what are we going to try to explain or cover in this specific webinar. I'm going to talk about general considerations in terms of reviewing for foreign investors if investing or creating a company in Mexico will be, one, a good choice, and two, how difficult or how complicated it will become. We usually receive around four very, very repetitive questions that I'm going to try to cover in the initial part of this webinar, including obviously the first question that once the foreign investor decide that they want to move forward, the first question would be the choice of entity. What type of entities are available in Mexico, and what are the difference between them? And if there's any, obviously. Then we're going to move forward with my teammate Marco, my associate Marco, that will describe the process of the incorporation. Once you have decided in the first part that, according to the general considerations, that incorporating a company in Mexico is feasible for your project, and once you have decided already which type of entity is the best one for your project, then we're going to talk, Marco, my associate, we were talking about how an incorporation of a Mexican company with foreign investment cease. We're going to talk about the powers of attorney and apostilles to avoid the foreign investors to actually travel to Mexico to execute the public deed before the public notary. We're going to talk about the authorization for using a specific corporate name, its difference with a DBA, doing business as, which is a common registry in the United States, for example, which is more like a trademark or a commercial name. We're going to talk obviously about what will be required, what would you usually require our clients in terms of bylaws, in terms of officers and capital structure. Then Edgar will be talking about fairly new legislation in terms of incorporating a company. It's related obviously to complying with the identification of the controlling beneficiary. It's not new in terms of financial obligation. It became new since it was not necessary in order to incorporate a company. Now, since 2022, 23, I think, it is mandatory in order to obtain that, to obtain the registration of the company, and in order to be able to attend with the public notary, you will have to identify the controlling beneficiaries. At the end, Mariby Hurtado will talk about, once we have already completed all the documents, what would look in terms of logistics of closing and obtaining what will become the birth of the certificate of birth of a company, which is an incorporation deed. The closing, how would it look like? After that, we're going to talk about the registries. We're going to do this disclosure or waiver several times in this presentation, because we decided to divide it in mandatory and non-mandatory. To tell you the truth, all of them are mandatory. What we try to say in terms of mandatory and non-mandatory is that the ones that we're going to cover on the section of mandatory is those registry that any company, regardless of their activity, will have to have in order to be an operational company. Non-mandatory, it just means that it is mandatory, but only if you are performing certain acts. So we're going to talk about this mandatory as very, very essential registrations or registries that the company need to have in order to be able to operate in a very essential level. And it depends on their specific activity if they need or not to register for the following. Then we're going to review a timetable. Marco will also assist us with a timetable covering everything that we just described, how it seems in terms of time and in terms of what usually get us stuck at certain part of the process, and what usually steps takes, even though they may seem easy, more time than others, right? And then we're going to have a time for questions and answers for you. Hopefully, you won't wait until the last time. I invite you, all of you, to actually start posting your questions in our Q&A chat. I will be reviewing them, and in case I see that there is something that probably will be responded during the time of the webinar, uh, I will wait if that's an appropriate answer, and if not, at the end we will actually cover it with more detail. So thank you everyone again for being here, and I think Marco, you're next, right? You're gonna explain about the process of incorporation. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes.
No, yeah,
No,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, that's me. Uh, as I explained before, there are several considerations that need to be taken into mind in order to decide if incorporating a company it's a good decision for you. As you can see on the slide that I'm showing here, um, we have been told from our clients that in some jurisdictions, when a foreign investor intends to actually incorporate a company, some countries may request either a minimum fixed capital in order to be able to open a company, or at least a commitment for investment. Some of them obviously require higher or lower amounts. In Mexico, that is not the case. In Mexico, we do not have uh, a specific fixed amount. It needs to be agreed, obviously, by the shareholders. So the legislation, what it says is that the incorporation chart or the bylaws must state what would be the minimum capital that the company will need to have at all times. However, there is no a specific amount. So we have incorporated companies with as low as $10. And obviously, we have incorporated companies that have an initial capital structure of $100 million, right? So, well, usually our recommendation in these terms is to incorporate the company with $10, $100, $1,000, like a very low amount. And in order to fund the company and to fund the operations, then you will do as requested on demand. You will do capital increases. So first legal consideration in order to see if Mexican entity it's suitable for your project is that we do not have a minimum fixed capital in order to incorporate the company. The other one will be that there are no restrictions in terms of nationality. Also, some of our clients have expressed that in other jurisdictions, for example, in China, I think if you want to initiate operations, you usually have, or there are some cases that you need to have a national partner or a Mexican partner within the capital structure of the company. In Mexico, it is very, very possible and common that the companies have 100% of their capital structure owned by foreign investors. There is obviously certain practices and certain industry that are restricted to Mexican majority or completely Mexican ownership, but there are just a few of them. Probably it is not necessary to cover them, but right now they are obviously related to nuclear industry, or obviously to regarding military uses, things like that. But in terms of commonly commercial operations, we do not have that sort of restrictions in terms of nationality. Obviously, it can be one company or an individual who can own the complete shareholders structure. The other thing that is important to say is that in Mexico, we do not have sole proprietary or sole ownership companies. There is one, I mean, there is in Mexico, there is one commercial company that can be owned for a single individual. However, we will not be covering that because it is just available for Mexican citizens. And since the idea of this webinar is to discuss the requisites for investors that are from abroad, this SAS, which is called Sociedad por Acciones Simplificadas, which is a type of company that we imported from Colombia. It is only available for Mexican citizens, and is what we call a mezzanine company, a mezzanine commercial entity. It has a limitation in terms of revenue. Once you jump out, I think it's 3 million. I'm not pretty sure right now, but once you jump over that revenue, you will need to actually convert or transform into one of the other commercial companies. But The rest, the other one that usually the foreign investors need to or decide to use, they require at least 2 shareholders. However, there is no distinction in the law between the shareholders structure. So, I mean, it don't necessarily need to be 100%, 99% and 1%. We have seen cases in which is, and that's what we usually recommend if you don't want to have several like stakeholders, is to have 100% minus 1 share owned by, for example, the parent company abroad, and the one share is owned usually either by a director of the parent company or by another company which is part of the corporate group that the company has, right? So that's important. There needs to be at least 2 shareholders. However, there is no requirements in terms of how that capital structure is composed. It can be 100% minus 1 share, and the other one sent to the other one, right? So those are the general considerations. Then we have the very typical question, which is it's understandable, the choice of entity. What types of companies, of entities Mexico have? I think I'm being very definitive on this answer. No material distinction. There are some nuances on my answer, as you will see now. However, my conclusion usually is no, there is no material distinction between the companies. The 99.9% of the commercial companies in Mexico are one of the 3 usually used, which one is Sociedad Anónima, which can be compared to a corporation company, a share corporation company in the United States. Then we have limit liability company, which literally translates to Sociedad de Responsabilidad Limitada. So we have a limit liability company. And then we have like a modified version of the first one, a corporation, which is Sociedad Anónima Promotora de Inversión. All of them are commercial. What gives me the option to say that there is no material distinction is that usually the question of the choice of entity has to relate with the type of taxation that the company has. However, in Mexico, our tax legislation put together in the same rules and the same legislation and the same set of obligations, all commercial companies. So all those 3 types of companies that I just explained, that pretty much cover the 99.99% of the commercial companies existing in Mexico, are taxed with the same rules. So in terms of taxation, there is no distinction between Sociedad Anónima, which is a corporation, an LLC, or a Sociedad Anónima Promotora de Inversión, right? So that's why we say there's no material distinction. So what are the distinctions between them? Sometimes it's more academic distinction between, for example, the corporation is what it's called cash company, and the other one is a person company, the limit liability company. So it means that the limit liability company in Mexico has a restriction in terms of the number of partners or members that can be compressed there, which is 50. So it not necessarily means that there's a real restriction in there. Usually foreign companies do not have more than 3 shareholders or stakeholders. So at the end, the distinction between them, it's more in terms of corporate governance. However, again, you can make opt-outs or opt-ins in their bylaws that will transform one of the 3 to the other one if you decide one. So what we usually recommend, we have a recommendation, obviously, it's to go with the limit liability company. And it's just because the limit liability company has the leanest structure. For example, in the Sociedad Anónima and in the LLC, you can either have the management of the company appointed either to a board of directors or to a sole manager. However, in the Sociedad Anónima Promotora de Inversión, you necessarily have to, mandatory need to have a board of directors. So usually what we see is that the parent companies abroad are doing the corporate governance. The corporate governance is not happening in the within the Mexican entity. So that's how we usually rule out the Sociedad Anónima Promotora de Inversión, because it actually means to have more persons in a management body that will not be having meetings really. So we have the other one, the other two then as an option. However, the Sociedad Anónima, which is a corporation, will require to have a mandatory statutory auditor, which is a person that in its essence, is a person that the shareholders appoint in order to review the actions of the administration. Again, it just makes sense if you having corporate governance within the Mexican entity. However, the limit liability company does not require that mandatory statutory auditor. So the officers, for example, in a limit liability company can be just one single individual, which will be called sole manager, and that will be the leanest one. So that's our recommendation. It is not in terms of the taxation benefits of each one, because all of them will be taxed the same. They will have the same rules. We're just usually recommending la sociedad de responsabilidad limitada, because one, it literally translates to limit liability company, so it makes a lot of like confidence to the foreign common law, for example, jurisdictions. And the other one is just because that it has the leanest structure, right? So, however, we have several companies that decide after that for the corporation, for example. So once you decide in the first topic that the company, that incorporate a company is something feasible for you, because you understand that you don't have any limitations on the corporate structure, on the fixed amount of investment, you don't have to have a Mexican partner in order to incorporate a company. And once you have decide what type of company you want to incorporate, then you move forward to the process of incorporation. As I described, now it is the appropriate time. I wanted to transfer the estafeta before to Marco, but now, Marco, this is the topic that you're gonna cover, right? The process of incorporation.
Correct. Thank you very much, Joaquin, for that introduction. My name is Marco Antonio Tena, and I have been working in corporate M&A project finance in the last few years. And I think it's very interesting how the Mexican market environment is developing in terms of nearshoring, and there's many opportunities to expand or bring businesses to Mexico. So I'm going to talk about the process of incorporation, specifically starting with the powers of attorney that are granted. In Mexico, when companies are incorporated, they actually have the individuals here have to be present for the signature of the incorporation deed. However, the truth is, powers of attorney can be granted by other individuals abroad in another country by granting us a proxy of a power of attorney, where they will indeed state that either a company or an individual is granting a specific power of attorney in it's usually in our favor and the members of the law firm to actually appear before a notary public and incorporate the company. The important part of a power of attorney granted abroad is the fact that it has to be apostilled before a notary public. A notary public will look at the document and guarantee that the person who is granting the power of attorney has the correct authority to grant it on behalf of a company and is in fact the person who is actually saying that they are. This will allow the document to be legally binding in Mexico. The important part of an apostille is the fact that it will be legally recognized as a valid document. Hence, we will provide it to the notary public, and we will, once it is granted to the notary public, the notary public will review it, and we can proceed to incorporate the company. Indeed, the incorporation deed will actually have a specific message that states that these individuals were granted a specific power of attorney to appear before a notary public and incorporate the company. So now, once we have obtained the proxies and the powers of attorney granted by foreign individuals, we can proceed to prepare the bylaws. If maybe can you change to the next slide, please? Thank you. Before we talk about the bylaws, it's important to talk about the corporate name that will be obtained at the Ministry of Economy. Mary, we will talk about a little bit more about this process before we talk about the actual bylaws of the company.
Thank you very much, Marco. Indeed, we're going to have to obtain a corporate name. And we're going to talk about the importance of obtaining the corporate name as well as how to obtain it. First of all, we need to refer ourselves to the Mexican laws in order for us to know that the corporate name is not an option, regardless of the type of legal entity we're going to incorporate. That is why you must have a corporate name. And this corporate name can be obtained by means of the Ministry of Economy portal. And when you access to the portal, the first thing that the Ministry of Economy is going to ask you to do is to enter your e-signature. In Mexico, we know it as an e-firma. And basically, the e-firma or e-signature is this set or group of information and security data about you that identify you before our tax administrative authority, known in Mexico as SAT. Therefore, if you do not have this e-signature or e-firma, you will not be able to even begin with the process of obtaining a corporate name. In BGA, at least our corporate M&A team all of us do have our e-signature. Therefore, this means that we do not have any obstacles in order for us to obtain any corporate names. Furthermore, when we access and now are inside the portal, we are going to be asked to fill in 4 different gaps. The first one is the option of the corporate name. And you will need to have different options, but you can only submit one. We need to know that there is a difference between the corporate name and the commercial name. You need to submit a corporate name because it is mandatory as the laws in Mexico state, yet you can also submit a different commercial name. The second requirement is to choose the type of legal entity. And as Joaquin was stating previously, we need to have in advance the knowledge on what type of legal entities actually exist in Mexico in order for you to know what are the best or which is the best legal entity that satisfies your needs and your business practices. Therefore, you can have the SDRL, Sociedad de Responsabilidad Limitada, as Joaquin mentioned, was very similar to the LLC, or the variable stock capital, which is very similar to Sociedad Anónima here in Mexico. The third requirement is to select the state in Mexico on where you want to establish or incorporate your legal entity. And this is very important because the fourth and last requirement will have this follow-up, because depending on the selection of the state you want to incorporate your company in, will be the different options that the portal gives you for you to choose the public notary you want to constitute or incorporate your legal entity with. Finally, once again, with your e-signature or e-firma, you sign your request and you send it to the Ministry of Economy. Once you have sent it, in the term of 3 to 5 days, the Ministry of Economy will give you their response. And this response can have 2 possible scenarios. The first one is that your corporate name gets authorized, and the only thing left for you to do is download your PDF, send it to your public notary in order for them to obtain the precise information the Ministry of Economy is giving you throughout that PDF and add it to your incorporation deed. But if we have or find ourselves in the second scenario, our corporate name can get declined. And the reasons that a corporate name can get declined are very different from one another, but we always suggest our clients to try not to use the most common words in corporate law, such as industry, corporation, among other words, because as they are so commonly used, they are very easily to get rejected, and therefore your process of obtaining the corporate name will get rejected as well. In the case that the corporate name is declined, you will have to do the process all over again until one of your corporate names gets authorized. And Marco, I yield the voice to you in order for you to explain us the bylaws.
Thank you, Mary. Indeed, once we obtain the authorization to use a name for the company, it is important to create the bylaws. The bylaws are indeed the constitution of the company, and they will contain the most important aspects. It usually goes over the name, the duration of the company, the domicile, its corporate purpose, how the shares are managed, how the administration is carried out. At this point in time, what we only need, pretty much as Joaquin has mentioned, is the officers that will be carrying out the management and the administration of the company. As was mentioned previously, we usually work with companies that have their administration abroad. This means that it is important to consider the people that will be taking care of the company. Since the bylaws are pretty much open-ended, an agreement between the shareholders, it is possible to also include different types of provisions for investors. However, we suggest that these bylaws are left to be worked at by professionals, which is exactly how we used to work, and we can provide the bylaws for review and comments, but we usually work really fast and we obtain the bylaws quickly to incorporate the company, which is of essence. Now, something that must be considered is the fact that all amendments that are carried out afterwards should be done before a notary public. However, once we incorporate the company, there are new provisions in Mexican legislation that require all companies to identify their controlling beneficiary. So I will yield now the voice to Edgar, who will talk a little bit more about how these requirements are established and fulfilled by companies in Mexico.
Thank you, Marco. Well, like Marco told us, I'm going to talk about the ultimate beneficiary owner that is better known in Mexico as a controlling beneficiary. It is important to mention that for the establishment of a company, it is vital to realize that the regulation in Mexico regarding money laundering prevention will require us to declare to the notary prevention requires to declare to the notary who the controlling beneficiary is. So when we declare the controlling beneficiary, it will involve identifying in the latest versions who the owners of the company's property are. Such information must be declared before a public notary when we establish the company. Should we fail to do so, we will not be able to proceed with the creation of this new corporation. So it is also important that legal entities must secure and keep accurate, comprehensive, and current details about their beneficial owners as part of their financial records, and also to furnish this information to the tax administration service upon request, also in accordance with the guidelines, and also with the deadlines set by this autonomous body. So in this next slide, we will see who are they? Who are the beneficial owners? So it will be a person, or it can be a group of people who either benefit from being part of a legal entity or have the power to use or to control it, or also a person or group of people who have influence or control over this legal entity. It is important to mention that if we can't identify the beneficial owner, if no person meets this set criteria, the individual acting as the legal entity's sole administrator, or it can be the members of the management body, will be deemed the beneficial owners. So on the next slide, we will see that the required information by the notary public in the incorporation of our new company will be the full names and surnames of the beneficial owners, their alias, date of birth, sex, the country of origin, their nationality, the jurisdiction of residence, the number or key of the official identification, also the federal taxpayer registry, specific in Mexico, and if they are from another country, it will be the tax ID of that country, the marital status. It is important also to mention the contact information of these beneficial owners, their home addresses, the tax address, also the relationship that they have with the legal entity, the degree of participation, the number of shares, the place of deposit of these shares, date of acquisition of the company, and the modification if they are made to the beneficial owners inside the company. Now we will see the responsibilities of this. When we incorporate this new company, we will have some responsibilities in the matter of beneficial owners. So first of all, we will have the obligation to establish and also to follow well-documented internal controls. This must be sensible and essential to acquire and also to keep details about the identities of the controlling beneficiaries. We will need to effectively recognize, check, and confirm the identity of the controlling beneficiary. We will need to gather, to hold, and to ensure the availability of this information. It is important to mention also that this information needs to be accurate, it needs to be complete, relevant, also exact, and current. We always need to keep records of the controlling beneficiary, the chains of ownership, and control, the supporting documents that I told you when we were talking about in the last slide, the proof of the control of these processes, and last of all, it is important to furnish and to grant prompt access to these records to the regulatory bodies. And on this last slide, we will see the penalties if we do not share the beneficial owners' information to the notary public when we are incorporating this new company. So first of all, for not acquiring, keeping, or providing the required information, the fines are ranging from $1.5 million to 2 million Mexican pesos. If we fail to keep the information current with the modifications, the fines will be between 800,000 Mexican pesos and 1 million Mexican pesos. And the last penalty that the authority can determine is for not presenting the information in a complete manner, or if we present information that is incorrect, false, or not in the required format, the fines will be from $500,000 to 800,000 Mexican pesos. So now my partner will help us talk about the logistic of closing the process of incorporation.
Thank you very much, Edgar. In summary, what happens after we have received all the documents that we have requested our clients to deliver us, or that the public notary has asked us to deliver? Well, first of all, we need to review all the documents and have the certainty that they are complete and that there is nothing left for us to request to our clients. If the information is complete, then we can begin with the process with the public notary. And I would like to make a brief pause in here in order for you to fully understand what comes within the process of the public notary, because depending on each and every public notary depends the requirements they are going to ask us to deliver to them. So because of their internal practices, there are some public notaries that request us a large amount of information, and there are some other public notaries that with very basic information, but with the accurate information, they can begin the process. So one or some of these documents can be the tax status certification of every single one of the shareholders or the partners, as well as the identification of the person who is going to be signing the document or that is acting as the legal representative. Between or among other documents, these are some of the ones that most of the public notaries always ask us to deliver to them. So when we have gained or acquired all these documents, we need to talk to the public notary in order for us to explain to them the context of the incorporation company we want to do with them. Because some of the public notaries are not aware that because we're talking of foreign investments, some of the shareholders are actually living abroad. So that means that most of them cannot be able to come to Mexico to sign the documents, and there is why the importance of actually explaining the notary public why we are going to sign as their legal representatives these documents. After we have explained the context to these public notaries, then we submit to them the project that we as a firm have prepared, but that the client authorized. And then if we are lucky, in less than 1 week, we can have the draft project. We have had different cases where the public notaries, because of the large amount of work they have, if we are lucky, in 2 days, we can have the draft project, and in 1 week, we can have the signed document. But there are some other cases where the public notaries have a lot of work and it takes longer than 1 or 2 weeks in order for them to deliver to us the draft project. Therefore, it takes longer to conclude the process of incorporation. Yet it is something that you must be aware of. When we have received the draft project, we must thoroughly review it in order for us to know that the information that is being in that instrument is the accurate information, that it is correct, and review, for example, the names of the shareholders or the partners, their tax IDs, the dates, and other important information. When we have had the final changes in that instrument, then we can accept the draft project, and the notary public will then commence to add or incorporate all the formalities into this document, and therefore we can program an appointment in order for us to go and sign the instrument. Once the instrument has been signed, the public notary is going to register before the Public Registry of Commerce or instrument or the incorporation of our legal entity. And we must know once again that because of our Mexican laws, it is a mandatory requirement for the legal entities to be registered before the Public Registry of Commerce, because if not, the legal entity will come irregular. Normally, this activity is executed by the public notary itself, and the public registry gives a registry form guaranteeing the date when the registry was carried out, the name of the corporation, the number of the document, and the registration number precisely, among other information that is very important for you to have by means of this registry. And finally, when we have the signed document and we have registered our legal entity, now we can go once again to the public notary to obtain our original incorporation deed and a certified copy, which is a thing that we always suggest our clients to have, a certified copy of their original incorporation deed. And here is the final step of the incorporation of a legal entity. But this does not mean that the shareholders or the partners are free to not do any more registries or have any other obligations. That is why we are going to talk about the subsequent registries that, as Joaquin very accurately mentioned, we divide them into two: the mandatory registries and the non-mandatory registries. And on what depends this character? As Joaquin mentioned, it depends on the activities the company is carrying out. Not because the non-mandatory requirements are not enforceable, no, but they do depend on the activities the company is carrying out. When we talk about the mandatory registries, we need to know that they are enforceable for every single legal entity, regardless of the type they have. So we're going to have two different registries. The first one is the National Registry of Foreign Investments, known in Mexico as RENIE, and the second one is the Federal Taxpayers Registry, also known in Mexico as RFC. When we talk about the National Registry of Foreign Investments, I would dare to say that it is a very complicated registry because it is very precise with the information. And if you fail to prove the information you are stating in the gaps, your registry will be declined or rejected, and you will have to do it once again. So the grounds of this national registry can be found in the Foreign Investment Law in Section 32, subsection 1, that specifies that all companies with foreign share participations or equity holding must be registered before this National Registry of Foreign Investments. Once again, you're going to need to have your e-signature. If you do not have it, you will not be even able to once again begin with the process or send the process to the National Registry or the authorized authority. This National Registry is very precise on the information, as I was stating, because it has very specific documents and requirements to be fulfilled by the firm or by the shareholders or the partners. This process divides into two phases. The first phase regards specifically to the legal representative. So the legal representative, all the legal representative needs to do is fill in its basic information, such as his or her name, address, number, email, etc., and just upload two different documents. The first one is the documentation that proves its position as a legal representative, and the second document is to add or submit the incorporation deed. The second phase regards only to the information of the company that is going to be submitted before this national registry. So the information I was telling you that was very precise and specific is, among other gaps, is the name of the shareholders, their nationality, the percentage of the shares or the equity holdings that they have in the case that they are partners, the number of workers they have in Mexico, the state of where the capital goes to, among other information. And after you have filled all those gaps or all those requirements, you will need to upload documents that certified or that prove those information that you have been uploading. So you once again need to upload your incorporation deed, the ID of the legal representative once again. You need to submit a signature letter that authorizes certain people to do this process before the National Registry, as well as their identifications. And finally, the importance of this National Registry regards on the fact that after your incorporation deed has been fully or duly completed, you have 40 days to register your corporation in this national registry. If you do not submit your corporation to this national registry, you will be sanctioned. And the range of these fines can vary from $2,000 to $600. Obviously, it depends on how late the petition to register was filed, but yet you need to know that you must do this register or else you will be sanctioned. Now we're going to talk about the second mandatory registry, which is the Federal Taxpayers Registry. And here, most of the time, we do find ourselves locked in a cage because it does not depend on us on whether this RFC known in Mexico can be obtained easily or not. It depends completely on the tax administrative authority known in Mexico as el SAT. So the time lapse to obtain an appointment in this Federal Taxpayers Registry varies between 2 or 3 weeks. And this appointment cannot be done by any person. Specifically, the only person that can obtain this appointment are the persons that have a tax ID, specifically in Mexico, known as RFC, specifically for Mexico. If you do not have your tax ID or your RFC, you cannot make this appointment. And this Federal Taxpayers Registry is very precise, once again, with information, because sometimes they give you the special requirements and documents you need to take to your appointment. Yet there are some little letters that not all of us read, or that the authority does not give us, and very easily we can get our process once again declined. So some of these documents and requirements are that first, the person that attends the appointment needs to be the person who took or filed the appointment. So the SAT, the first thing that they're going to ask you is to deliver to them your ID in order for you to compare that you actually are the person who got the appointment and who is going to be throughout the rest of the process. The second requirement is to present the incorporation deed and the powers of attorney that avail you to be presented before this authority. As a third requirement, you need to submit the proof of address in Mexico for at least 6 months. And here is where there is a catch between the documents, because if your proof of address or your contract, whatever it is that you present to El SAT, does not have office's purposes, your process or your submission will be rejected, and you will once again have to file for an appointment. Finally, you need to present the invoice issued by a Mexican legal entity availing that proof of address. And these last two requirements, sometimes the receipt that the SAT gives you does not specify these two last requirements. Therefore, you need to be very precise with information you are taking to them, because if there is anything that does not match with the information you are presenting, they will very easily reject or decline your process, and you will have to once again do your appointment, and as long as it takes to do it. Now I will yield the voice to Edgar in order for him to explain us the non-mandatory registries.
Thank you, Mariby. Well, it is important to mention that, as Joaquin emphasized at the beginning of this webinar, it's crucial to acknowledge that the registries they will be discussing are essential for companies that engage in specific activities. These specific activities involve hiring personnel, also placing foreign human capital in Mexico, and managing export and import operations. So the first non-mandatory registry we will be talking about is the Mexican Social Security Institute, the IMSS, in this next slide. Okay, can you? Thank you, Marie. So employers are required to contribute to Social Security benefits. These Social Security benefits involve housing, also healthcare, and retirement savings for their employees. It's critical for employers to register with the IMSS, the Mexican Social Security Institute, and to sign up their employees. This registration is also necessary to manage contributions from both employees and employers. This will ensure employees are covered and that employers fulfill their contribution obligations. So the necessary documentation we will need for completing this registry will be, first of all, proof of address. Then we will also need the legal representative's power of attorney. We will need the company's article of incorporation. And the last document that we will need is the digital signatures of both the company and also the legal representative. On this next slide, we will see a registry that is with the National Migration Institute. The employer registration certificate is a document that confirms that a person, or in this case, our new company that we are making the incorporation, this legal entity is authorized by the National Migration Institute to employ foreign staff here in Mexico. The documentation we will need that is required by the National Migration Institute will be the incorporation deed of our new company, also the legal representative power of attorney. We will need also the identification of this legal representative, proof of address. We will need the federal taxpayers registry that Mariví explained to us. When we make this registry, they will give us a registration certificate, and we will use this certificate to make the employer registration certificate. The last document that we will need is the evidence of the most recent tax declaration or tax return. Then on this next slide, we will see a registry that is important if we make labors of exportation or for importers. This registration is compulsory for individuals and entities that intend to import or export certain items into or out of the country of Mexico. So these specific items are detailed in sections A and B of Annex 10 of a document that its name is General Rules of Foreign Trade Information. So we need to check this document, and if our company is having this import or export operations regarding these specific items, we will have to make these exporters and importers registry. So which is the eligibility criteria we will need to have this registry? So first of all, we will need to be registered with the Federal Taxpayers Registry that we have explained. We also need to have the possession of an e-signature, a firma, known here in Mexico. We will need to be in compliance with all the tax obligations to the date. We will need the fiscal address must be recorded and also located in the RFC or undergoing verification. Here in Mexico, there is something called the tax mailbox, that it's like a platform where the authority, the tax administration service, used to notify us some administrative acts. So our tax mailbox should be validated by the SAT. We also need to engage a custom agent or have an authorized custom representative or a legal representative. The last eligibility criteria is that our new company doesn't have to be listed under Article 69 and 69B by the SAT. This is a list that tell us which are the companies that are determined by the SAT as shell companies. So now my partner Marco will help us discuss the timetable of the incorporation process.
Thank you very much, Edgar. And we have been talking about the incorporation of a company detonates pretty much 4 simultaneous procedures. Once we know what the name of the shareholders will be, once we have obtained the proxies, it usually takes between two weeks to prepare. At the same time, the corporate name is also obtained. The powers of attorney usually are dependent on how fast the foreign individual, the foreign company is needing the documents, because we have been with cases where the apostille was granted in October, but we just received it. And then we have seen cases where the apostille is obtained in either 1 or 2 days, and the document is with us within a week. So once we obtain the powers of attorney and receive them physically, we work with the notary public to prepare the bylaws, to prepare the formalization of the powers of attorney, and this usually takes approximately 3 weeks. What we have seen in our experience is that it really depends on how fast the notary public works. We usually work with a specific public broker, which are also allowed to incorporate companies in Mexico in the same way as a notary public. But our close relationship with this public broker has allowed us to issue and obtain the formalization incorporation deeds for the companies quickly within weeks. So in the end, what we usually see when creating a company, when obtaining the names of the shareholders, when deciding if it will be a sole manager or a board of directors, that we take approximately 4 to 6 weeks to incorporate a company, depending on how fast everyone is working to obtain the documents. Also, it is important to consider that the documents traveling might be held up, might take a little more time. So this time lapse usually varies between the business and how far away the companies are and how difficult it might be to obtain an apostille, but it usually doesn't take more time than this. So in the end, we're looking at an expected timetable of approximately 6 weeks to incorporate a company in Mexico. Once once the incorporation deed is signed and registered before the Public Registry of Property and Commerce, we would detonate or initiate the second part of the process of incorporating the company in Mexico. And that is where we believe that an expected timetable can vary a lot because of the authorities. When we talk about the registrations, this can usually take at least a month, for example. Our usual timetable with SAT, for example, to obtain an appointment is 1 or 2 weeks once the company is incorporated, but it can be rejected due to formalities in the documents, and some processes might take a little bit longer. But usually we work within this time frame. We think it's very manageable and reasonable, and in terms of the expectations of the people who are incorporating this, well, foreign investors, foreign nationals need to understand that Mexico is an extremely formalistic country. So these kinds of documents to prepare take several weeks, but it's not something that will take forever. It will be carried out swiftly and smoothly. So with this, we will be wrapping up our presentation. We open the floor to any additional questions that you might have on how to incorporate a business in Mexico, and we thank you all for taking your time to be here with us.
Thank you, Marco. I just want to add something to your explanation in terms of the timetable and to let people know, as you already see, Marco is expecting to have an incorporation from zero to the incorporation, the existence, and the delivery of the public deed around between 4 and 6 weeks. However, also, as Marco explained it, we usually move forward with the obtention of the tax ID, which will be what eventually makes the company operative. That tax ID will be required in order to make other registries, and tax ID will be required in order to open a bank account, and that tax ID will be required for any other more formal types of agreements, such as the lease agreement for infrastructure or for the premises of the company. So usually between 0 to obtaining the tax ID and the foreign national registry, which Mariby explained it, takes around 12 weeks. In a conservative, obviously we have done it much faster. We have been able to obtain that process in probably 6 weeks, including the tax ID. However, it pretty much depends on what Marco said. How long does it takes for a client to obtain the notarization and apostille of the proxies that will be required in order to attend with the public notary to sign the documents. And we also will be we'll be waiting in case the representative of the company, the tax representative of the company, will be willing to travel to Mexican cities that do not have a lot of population, and so the meetings will be given in a shorter period of time. So, for example, in Mexico City, obviously the most populated city in Mexico, the appointment that you will attend will be probably 4 to 3 weeks in advance. However, in cities like Aguascalientes, cities like Toluca, cities like Merida, it will be able to short that distance probably between 1 to 2 weeks. So it will depend on the urgency, obviously, of incorporating a company and to obtaining bank accounts and everything. Uh, in order to open bank account, which is not covered here because it's not necessarily either a registry, neither a legal process, but it is important to state that until you have your corporation deed and your tax ID and your domicile, you won't be able to obtain the bank account. Bank account uh, will have to have someone to attend to the bank in person that has enough faculties to actually represent the company in order to open said bank account. And the opening of a bank account can take almost 1 to 2 weeks also to review, because some of the banks, due to the compliance regulation, will require to verify the existence of domicile of the company. So we'll have to make or schedule a visitation to the company to review that. So it is important to let you know that a complete process between scratch or zero to a fully functional company with tax ID, bank account, several other registries such as the employer's registry and everything, usually takes around 12 to 16 weeks. So it's not, unfortunately, obviously, it's not as fast as other jurisdictions. Uh, we, I mean, ourselves, we have been able to open companies in the United States within a week, right? And the following week you have a bank account. This is not the case in Mexico, and there are a lot of places in which things can go wrong and dramatically increase the time of this. As Marco said, if you keep going with with the tax authority and keep presenting documents that are not enough or do not comply with the very specific interpretations that that specific office has of the law, you will be rejected several times, and that will increase dramatically the process. Or, for example, if the proxies that you're preparing in order to provide someone in Mexico faculties to attend before the public notary is not uh, uh, previously discussed with the public notary, you can go through the complete process of executing, signing, notarizing, apostilling the documents, send it to Mexico, only to present it to the public notary, and the public notary will say that some formality was not placed in there. For example, there was no certain wording, or there was something in the power of attorney that will not make them functional. So you will have to actually start all over again the process. So even though 12 or 16 weeks for a complete functional company, it's 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 a long time compared to other jurisdictions. The truth is that if you do not go with a knowledgeable team that actually knows that, this can take, and we have seen cases for clients that come from us and say, I've been trying to incorporate a company for 6 months and I haven't been able to achieve it. So uh, I wouldn't say that it's difficult. It just you have to deal with a lot of authorities and a lot of people, and all of them, according to Mexican fiscal legislation, have jointly liable for a lot of things, such as controlling beneficiary that Edgar explained. So public notary will be jointly liable for the shareholders in case any of the identifying documents are not delivered. They will be jointly liable for fines up to 1 million pesos, which is around $50,000. So that I think that will be my conclusion on this matter. It is not a complicated process in terms of the depth of the legal matters that need to be covered, but there's a lot of things that need to be very well programmed in the first stages of the process, right? For example, this thing that Mariby explained, in order to obtain a tax ID in Mexico, you will need that the individual that is representing the company has its own personal tax ID. So that almost in all cases rules out any director from the parent company, any person that is outside Mexico, because the person that will be attending to the tax authority, to the tax office, will have to have its own tax ID. And sometimes in the early stages, obviously the companies do not have anyone to represent them, but that representative will be jointly liable for for the tax that are not being paid by the company. So all of these nuances need to be addressed on the very first stages of the project, and that's what we usually try to assist to our clients. So thank you again for being here with us. I will leave you the floor with the Q&A chat. I see one which is asking if will we be sharing the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and we're gonna upload it to our YouTube page, YouTube channel, so you can definitely go over it if you think it contains information that may be useful for someone that you know. Please feel free to share it with them. And thank you very much. Does anyone has any question also? I will give a little bit of seconds to do that. It seems not. It seems that we were very clear on all of our information. So thank you again. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Mariby. Thank you, Edgar. And thank you all of you for joining us. And we will be sending you information regarding our next webinars and the topics. And I would like to invite you to follow our social media pages of Vega Guerrero y Asociados. Thank you very much. Goodbye.